everybody, it's Esther Crew from Inclusion Live, and I'm delighted to start another podcast with you. I'm joined by Kate O'Rourke, and we'll hear a little bit about Kate's experience in a moment, but this podcast is all about leadership and inclusion, creating brilliant workplaces, and we're inviting senior leaders to join us and share their unfiltered leadership experiences and their strategies for success. So by way of introduction to Kate, she's 30 years and more experience providing strategic advice in the protection and enforcement of brands internationally, and is of counsel with Mewburn Ellis LLP. There's lots and lots of accolades to Kate's experience, and she's been awarded an MBE for services to further education and has spent many years supporting as the Vice Chair of Governors with local further education. But without further ado, Kate knows her experience far better than me. So very warm welcome to you, Kate, to the podcast. Please tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Esther. And I suppose at this stage of my career, there's quite a lot to look back on and hopefully some things to look forward to as well. So I think it's relevant that I was born in Australia and I qualified as a solicitor in Australia and worked in the IP profession there before leaving to move to New York for a bit of an adventure and then ending up in London, where I am today. So when I did come to London, I requalified as a Trade Mark Attorney and as a solicitor in England and Wales. And it's that part of my career that I think I'd like to focus on today because it's been fairly linear. I joined an IP boutique firm when I first arrived. That was Jenkins, which is still around. But then I moved to a general law firm, and it was there I first made partner. And that was sort of a normal trajectory for someone like me with my qualifications, but also with the aspirations that I've always had to be successful in my career. And I think that was quite, as I said, quite linear, quite straightforward. But then I took a step back at one stage, and that coincided with having a family. And I stopped being a partner and became senior counsel at a US law firm. I then moved on to another firm, again, still staying with that senior counsel position until I did move to Mewburn Ellis in 2019, again as a partner. And I think that I learned a lot of lessons over the years as to how you need to look at your career and to think about what's most important for you at the time. And I made choices that if I went back and talked to myself 20 years ago, would I make the same choices? I'm not sure. But it's stood me in good stead, and I'm certainly very happy where my career has got to today.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. And I think we want to dive into some of those choices. And for those of you listening to the podcast, our focus today is about advancing women in leadership. But actually, I think this topic should appeal to everybody, because whether you are a woman advancing your career already in leadership, or indeed observing perhaps as a male colleague of women in leadership, there's lots of things we can learn about and think about together to create the most successful workplaces for everybody. So why don't we dive in? It's a matter close to your heart, Kate. So thank you for joining. Why are you so passionate about advancing women in leadership? What is it that you have been particularly focused on through your career?
Well, as I said, it's been quite a long career now, and I've been able to witness over the years that, particularly in the legal profession and the IP profession just being a part of that, we see more and more women coming in at the junior levels, more and more female trainees coming in. But I still remember people saying 30 years ago, oh yeah, eventually what we're going to see is that we'll have equity at the top of the profession as well. So all of those women coming in, they will advance, and we will stop having this pyramid where you've got loads of women at the bottom and not many at the top. And honestly, people were saying that to me 30 years ago, and it's still the case today. So that has been a source of great frustration to me over the years. But it has improved. There's no question that it's improved since I joined the profession, because actually back then there weren't many women, particularly on the patent side of the profession. But now, I mean, certainly in our firm, we're seeing equal numbers of men and women coming in as trainees. And I'm still waiting for that pyramid to collapse, though, into a bit more of a square, hopefully. But if I go back even further, I would actually say it was my mother who inspired me so much. She was of a time when you left school as a woman pretty young, so she couldn't finish her high school. Didn't go to university or anything else. But she had two daughters as well as two sons, and she was absolutely adamant that she wanted her girls to achieve. She wanted us to have aspiration, if nothing else. She brought us up to think that we could achieve anything that we set our minds to, if we wanted to. And so I think a lot of my motivation comes from her, which is, still nice to think about today.
Definitely. So what was it that your mother instilled in you that you think has helped you forge your career? Apart from the aspiration, which sounds like an incredible way of encouraging and inspiring, but is there anything around her, the way she worked or her mindset, that you think has really helped you?
She thought women were better than men, frankly.
Okay, so there was never that challenge around, what's expected of a woman and what's expected of a man then?
No. I think that was one of her guiding principles in life. And she was very happy to see her daughters achieve. But she also had a very good mind. And she knew, actually, that if she'd had the opportunities that we had much later, then she could also have achieved. So it's a bit of frustration from her as well. So that's why she definitely wanted us to do as well as we could. But yes, there was always that bit of a sense that if women did rule the world, then we'd all be in a better situation.
Strength of conviction. So thinking back over your career, what really were the biggest challenges that you experienced and perhaps still experience as you look around you today?
I do think we can't change the profession without changing society. So I think that there are still societal challenges to not just to women, but also to everyone with caring responsibilities. We see it more with women because there is still an assumption that if you have a family, then it's much more likely that the mother will be taking the much more of the responsibility for caring and looking after the children. I mean, we've had great advances, but we still have so far to go, because if you think about parental leave, it's only recently that there's been a sense that men are allowed to take parental leave as well as women. If we institutionalize that to make it like other countries, particularly in Scandinavia, where they do accept that having a family or having elderly parents or children with disabilities that you need to look after is not just the responsibility of a woman. It is a family responsibility. So I think that sort of institutional reform is still needed in order to make sure that everyone in our society has the opportunity to succeed to the best of their abilities. Other challenges, I think there's one very specific one that really annoys me, and that is about part-time work. There are some people still who think that if you work part-time, then you're not actually serious, that you can't possibly be an equity partner in a law firm or take on management roles. And I think that is absolute garbage. I really do. And it really frustrates me. And I think we have lots of examples across the profession which we can point to that shows that people are quite capable of working part-time, doing other things maybe, not just caring responsibilities, which they can combine with their career and which actually might benefit their careers and how they operate within the industry. So, for example, you mentioned me being Vice Chair of Governors of my local further education college. I learnt so much from that role. I was chair of the Search and Governance Committee. We had responsibilities for the funding, for the organisation of the educational provision for thousands and thousands of students in North London. And there were skills that I learnt from that I would never have acquired. But of course, in order to be able to do that, I had to work part-time because I couldn't have done full-time and that as well. So I just think there needs to be a bit more of a sense of the benefits that can come from flexible working if people choose that for themselves.
So I think what you're highlighting there is there's benefits not only to the individual, but also to the organisation. So organisations really need to sit up and think about this. Now, part-time, I think, traditionally has been more of a role or a convention occupied by women. But I do think it's really encouraging when we see part-time workers of every gender and every level in the organisation. Do you think that we're breaking down those barriers now? Or what do you think leaders should be thinking about as a senior leader from a law firm?
I think that we sometimes go 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And I say that particularly in the context of working from home, which became much more common, obviously, during COVID, and where some organisations, not necessarily in the law, are actually trying to insist that everyone comes back to the office full time. I think that's an absolute retrograde step. I mean, people have proven that they can be just as efficient working away from the office as at the office. And it's that combined with part-time working can be beneficial for everyone. So it's not, you're absolutely right, Esther, it's not about just women benefiting from these developments. It's about everyone. And I also think that we have seen some experiments quite recently in the UK about people being paid 5 days for doing a 4-day for doing 4 days, and the efficiencies are still there. So I think that we as a society are looking at some of these new ways of working, but I think there's still quite a bit of fear and misunderstanding that it may be all too much too fast. So I think leaders have a real role to play in saying, well, let's try it. I mean, if we don't give it a go, we'll never know. And if we do give it a go, it might well work for the benefit of the firm, the industry, and for society, and for our communities as well.
Yes, I really like that give it a go mentality. So it doesn't mean you can't row back if it doesn't work. It doesn't mean you can't put a framework around it to test it out and see how you best serve your clients and, make the business work well overall. So I like that as a mindset, or almost like let's give it a go. And thinking of mindset, we work in this space with IP law firms and lots of other businesses actually. And often it's about the mindset of the most senior people in the organisation that holds it back. It might be to do with their concern that they prefer to work in an office environment and personally it works for them. And so they make that assumption that it must be better for everybody. So if you're sat with your peers and this is the conversation they're having, what would you be saying in that situation, thinking about people listening into the podcast about how to navigate it for themselves?
Well, it's about information, I'd say, and it's about collating the data where it's available, but it's also about talking and listening to the people that work in your organization. They're the ones that you need to hear from. You need to hear about whether they see it as advantageous to work part-time, whether they see it as advantageous to work from home occasionally. In some positions, of course, people work from home all the time now. But I do think that whole listening approach is the first step in trying to understand what might be better for the organization as a whole. Because dictating rules from the top doesn't really seem to work very well in most instances, because you're not going to get the buy-in that way. But also I'd just move on a bit and say it's also about looking at the people that you work with and the positions of responsibility, and seeing who is in those positions of responsibility. Because if you look around and suddenly you're seeing all white men, then you've got multiple problems, frankly, because you're not representing the profession, you're not representing society. And you're probably missing out on quite a lot as an organization if you don't have more diverse views being presented uh, to your management board or to your partnership conferences. So I do think it is about the listening, but it's also about being alert to looking really, deeply into what you're seeing when you look at your own organization if you are in that position of power.
That's a really interesting one, because actually organisations form over a long time and leadership teams may become established, and then the challenge is how do we introduce different voices. But there's so many creative ways of listening and introducing diversity when decisions are made or when you consider how decisions are made. So have you got any experiences to share around that you think is a really great tip, perhaps for those listeners that might think, well, I relate to that, but actually, how do we go about doing it in a practical way?
Yeah, so outside of the law, in another organization, we definitely had a female deficit. It was just very, very male dominated. And we had quite a few subgroups. And what we decided was that there had to be 2 chairs of every subgroup, and at least one of those chairs had to be a woman. So we immediately, overnight, changed the look and the feel of the organization, because suddenly you couldn't have an entire conversation dominated by men because half of the people who were on the executive were now female. And so that was one approach we took there. But if I go back to the whole issue of the pyramid and the women coming in at the bottom, then I think we've got many more problems, because I talked about the need for societal change to make sure that women weren't the ones with the primary caring responsibilities, which meant that we do lose some of them over the years. But there's also this sense that you've got to have the role models at the top. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation here. But I know that when I took on the role at Mu Bonalis, I would not have taken that role if I couldn't see that there was a very senior woman on the management board, Jo Cripps, and if I couldn't see that Maria Hall, who's our chief commercial officer, was very influential as well. So for me, looking at organisations where you've got women at the top is a sign that it's where I'm going to be most comfortable. And I have to say that, with Mu Bonalis, you've worked with us, and I think that some of the work that you've done with the firm has really paid dividends, because not only do we have a very flourishing D&I, like it goes through the whole organisation now, so I can't even say it's a group or it's a committee. It's just like everything up to the management board. But we also have a key woman champion, and we have a member of one of our patent attorneys, Lucy, is the chair of the Women in IP group, which is part of IP Inclusive. Our sustainability champion, Eleanor, another woman. So I have seen over the past few years many, many changes, positive changes, and I do see that reflected across the profession, where people are actually saying this is an opportunity for us to encourage those younger women to grow, to give them the opportunities to lead in different positions. And I think that's really important for an organisation as well. Identify those areas where you can start to support younger women, give them the responsibilities, give them the training so that they can become good managers and leaders. Because, as you know, just because you're a good attorney doesn't mean you're necessarily going to automatically be a great leader.
No, and it does take almost like thin slicing the opportunities and saying where do they exist, and not living in this mindset which is, well, we've done it this way all the time and we need to continue to do it this way all the time. We've got some fantastic candidates. Let's make sure that we consider them on their merits. So really, really great tip. So just thinking about where you are now with all this wealth of experience behind you, what 3 strategies would you suggest to anyone listening? And it might be that you are a woman listening and you're saying, what should I do? What do you think are the most effective strategies that you've personally benefited from?
Saying yes. So I think there's a lot of research that indicates that women don't tend to say yes to an offer of a new job or a new position unless they think they're absolutely 100% qualified to do it.
Yeah.
And the research also shows that men have a slightly different attitude, and they'll say, give it a go. And honestly, I say, just say yes and give it a go, because you'll probably find that you're fine. So that's my number one tip.
Number one, in every situation, give it a go. I love that. That flows in so many ways.
And then a second tip would be to get allies. So men, women, people who you know will support you. And it may be formal support, like having a sponsor, which I know is much more common in the US than it is here yet. Mentors are much more common here, which is a great thing, I think. But I think making sure that you know who you can go to discuss things with, and that could be outside your organization or within. But you need those allies, because none of us do all this by ourselves. I mean, I remember one conversation I had when I was president of the Chartered Institute of Trade Mark Attorneys, and this woman came up to me and said, okay, Kate, so I'm on the council. I'd like in the future to think about becoming president of SITMA, and I'd like to become a partner in my law firm, and I'm going to have some kids. And she said, do you think I could do it? I said, yes, of course. And of course, she has done all that, you know.
She has done all that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. And one last thing, what would you suggest?
There's just a bit of hard work, frankly. Research, knowing what it is that you want, what it is you want to go after, how to do that. You can't get away from the fact that you've got to work hard at some things, especially if you want them. And frankly, it's all the more rewarding when you do have to work to get those things, to achieve those things.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you. And I think it's really interesting that there's been research showing about how to advance your career, and you've hit the nail on the head with your 3 strategies, actually. So create the opportunity, put yourself in the position for it to happen, have some visibility, have a sponsor, have a mentor, and actually make sure you deliver the performance expectations, because you won't get promoted without performance. But you need the visibility and the opportunity to get promoted. So that's absolutely fantastic in a nutshell. Thank you so much for being a guest on Inclusion Live, the Best is Leadership podcast. It's been fantastic to talk to you again. And, you know, if you are interested, Women in IP is a really good place to start if you're in this industry too. But of course, your advice and suggestions apply to anyone in any industry. So thank you, Kate O'Rourke, for joining us as a guest.
Thanks, Esther.